Junior's, my great-grandparents came from Scotland, his great-grandparents came from Ireland.
Oh, gee, that's that's a handle and a half.
Yeah. Well, his grandfather.
Okay, this regular meeting of the Berwick Board of Selectmen on this May 1st, 2012 is in session. Clerk has the roll call, I assume, Judy? Terrific. All right. Let's everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Both Attorney Dench and Attorney Shepard are going to be joining us this evening. Attorney Dench, in particular, is currently on his way from Portland, so his arrival time is expected to be no sooner than 7 o'clock, but in that vicinity. So the chair would suggest that we exercise some flexibility around the organization of tonight's agenda to facilitate and accommodate the schedule of our town attorney and co-counsel. Would
Need a motion to suspend
motion
the
to
rules?
suspend the rules?
So moved.
Second motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, the board has agreed to suspend the rules, which is parliamentary language for just rearranging the agenda. Again, we're doing that to accommodate the schedules of both attorneys this evening. I would like to clarify that the executive session under MRSA 4056E is actually going to be segmented into two different components. One of which will be to, let me make sure I get this right, to review the litigation with pending litigation with attorneys Shepard and Dench. The second executive session under 4056E will be to discuss the legal rights and duties of the board with just Attorney Dench. And while we have the attorneys present this evening, I suggest we also move up the executive session for 4056A so that we can accomplish all of those together in succession while the attorneys are present. That being clarified, the next order of business is the approval of minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes of April 17th as presented to us.
I'll second that.
Now, I didn't see anything in these minutes that, we have a motion and a second, so we're on to discussion. I didn't see anything in these minutes that indicated that we accepted the minutes of the April 10th executive session. So the chair would suggest that first we need to
Amend them?
accept the rules of the April 10th meeting, and then secondly, we need to amend the minutes of the April 17th meeting to reflect that, actually, no.
So you're saying we didn't,
We did not do the April 10th minutes, so we should do that tonight in addition, but I don't think we need an amendment to the April 17th minutes because it just wasn't accomplished. And either that or you could say that it was not accomplished, but I don't think you need to do that.
That's a 9:30 meeting?
Correct.
Okay. Well,
And there were minutes published for those.
Yes, I'll move that we accept the minutes for the April 10th executive session, 2012.
Okay, so we have a
You have a motion and a second
for the
on
April 17th.
I would take care of
So
them and
let's
then go
do
back
that
to
first,
Oh,
okay?
okay.
Any further discussion on the April 17th minutes? Okay, all in favor of accepting the April 17th minutes?
Well, do you plan on amending April 17th?
I mean, the only amendment that I would see would be appropriate would be to say that the April 10th minutes were not accepted at the April 17th meeting, and that's just an omission, so I
Okay.
think saying nothing accomplishes the same thing.
So you don't plan on amending it? Okay.
Negative.
Okay.
Okay, so, all in favor of accepting the April 17th minutes? Raise your right hand. Terrific. Okay, so now we have a motion to accept the April 10th minutes,
So moved.
Second.
and that is seconded. Any discussion on the very brief April 10th minutes for our executive session, dual executive session meeting? Okay. All in favor of accepting those minutes? Very good. Okay. Let's move right into public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would care to speak? If so, please step up to the podium and identify yourself using the microphone so that those folks watching at home can hear you. Mr. Long.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, Bob, Eleanor, Brian, Ernie. I don't know how many of you look on Facebook, but I look at it at a regular basis. There's been a lot of criticism in regards to the last meeting when you guys were just talking about budgets. I just want to clarify, you've made no decision on any budgets at this point.
That's right.
That's right? So it's safe to say that when you call the fire department, they'll roll, or when you call the police department or AMR, they're all gonna roll. Whether you do anything or not, whether you cut their budgets or not, we're still gonna have services. Okay. Bob, at the last meeting that you chaired, you had a statement at the beginning of the meeting that you weren't gonna accept any questions and that you were gonna accept questions in writing. Are you gonna answer those questions tonight from the previous meeting?
I didn't receive any in writing.
I've sent you some in writing, and Mr. Levine sent you some in writing.
I'm sorry, I didn't receive anything in writing.
Okay. Well, more specifically, we were talking in regards to, refresh your memory, in regards to the executive session. I don't remember the date, but the executive session that you just talked about, where you were gonna get co-counsel. There was no decisions supposedly made in that meeting, and yet we all know from Ernie's email that Alan Shepard consulted Mr. Dench a total of 5 days before the other four of you voted last Tuesday. So how did that happen? If there was no decisions made in executive session, how did that happen, Bob?
I guess that's legal privilege. He recommended several names, and he sent material to them so they'd be up to speed.
Right, but you can understand how that looks. I mean, after recalling 3 selectmen for whatever reason, you can see how that looks, that you go into an executive session, you come out of it, you say there's been no votes taken, the chairman's on vacation, we come to the next meeting, Ernie sends out an email the Friday that the chairman goes, and we all learn that Alan's already consulted another attorney. It kind of really looks from this side of the table, guys, that you guys made a decision. It just looks very, very inappropriate.
You know, Ron, I'd just like to say that, and I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. And I think that maybe all of us should take a little bit of blame there, because it was after midnight, and I sat in there and I thought, we gotta do this when we come out. I don't know where I was at 12:15, but I guess I wasn't with it,
I understand.
because I didn't make any motion or anything, and should have. We should have done it, but, so we were remiss in not doing that, and so I guess you can look at all 5 of us and say, you all take a little blame here.
Very good.
And
Thank you, Mrs.
And I
Murphy.
apologize.
No problem. During this whole process with the Bateman project, for everybody that doesn't know, or anybody that hasn't paid attention, both the town manager and Marcia Elton from day one have said that this wouldn't be low income. This past week, Jody Wright and David got some paperwork from Maine State Housing, which was the original application provided to them from Misha that the Batemans had filed back in '08 or '09, I don't have the dates right. But clearly throughout that entire package, it says not only low income, it says for the mentally handicapped and the homeless. So I just want everybody to understand that the lies about this project have been from day one, and that Keith has said from day one that it's going to be affordable housing. It's just simply not true. That's not what Bateman applied for to Maine State Housing, and that's not what he was funded on. And then finally, I do want to remind you, the budget meeting that we were all at on that Saturday, both Jody Wright and the chairman spoke to the town manager and asked him if he knew about the 3 bedrooms or the footprint. And on 2 different occasions, he said no. I have seen pages 123 and 125, which I had here at the last meeting, that specifically said from Maine State Housing to Keith Trefether, not anybody else, to Keith, specifically had the 3 bedrooms in there. And I want you guys to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Long. The chair would like to express an opinion on your first comment regarding the decisions surrounding the executive session that we had a couple of weeks ago. There truly were no decisions to hire or not hire co-counsel during that meeting. It was the expectation of the chair that, and the statement was carefully crafted in the executive session to read in public, which stated that we were going to pursue co-counsel and that Attorney Dench was going to develop a list of names.
Shepherd.
Excuse me, Attorney Shepherd. So it was the expectation of the chair that at another meeting, we would vote to either pursue or not pursue co-counsel, which hadn't been done to that point. And then we would proceed to select a co-counsel. Now, there was, I agree with you wholeheartedly that there was a email and telephone poll conducted of the selectmen by the manager trying to gain consensus and make a decision effectively without a public meeting. And I did object to that. I have an email trail to document that if you care to see it. And I instructed the manager to send an email to the rest of the selectmen stating my objection to that process and that we indeed needed to get this on the agenda for that Tuesday's meeting. And while I was on vacation, Eleanor and Bob accomplished that, and there was a vote held. Now, your bone of contention that there was some kind of pre-decision to use Attorney Dench, what effectively should have happened is that if we were going to send a package to one attorney, because of the time crunch, the necessity to prepare over that weekend in advance of the hearing, which could have been as early as Tuesday or Wednesday, that following weekend ended up being on Thursday, I believe. But there was a time crunch, and so because Attorney Dench was Attorney Shepherd's first choice, he sent the paperwork to Attorney Dench. He should have sent it to all 3 until we made a decision. So then I can see your point that on the next board meeting, Attorney Dench had all the information. There was pressure perhaps to vote for Attorney Dench. So that process could have been and should have been handled better. It does also remind me of the way it appears things used to be done with the old board, and the new board is completely committed to being more transparent and open and accountable. So I would urge the board to make sure that we don't allow those who sometimes counsel and guide us to lead us down a path that is not the way it should happen. And indeed, it's my opinion that that's what happened on that particular case. So you have Eleanor's comment, you have the chair's comment. I think we have consensus of the board that could have been done better, and that a commitment from us that we will make every effort to do it right and do better moving forward.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as a person who's been on the board for many years, we always did come out and make a comment. And why I didn't think of it, I don't know. That we really probably should have. That's the way I feel.
Have made a comment or made a vote?
But no, not a vote, just saying that there was no vote taken.
We did make that comment.
Yeah, we did maybe discuss thinking about hiring a co-counsel.
Right.
Because that's what,
I'll speak for myself in that I felt pressure to not have a vote and to have no decision coming out of that meeting. And again,
I don't think there was any decision, but I think we did discuss it.
we certainly did. And I think with perhaps a little clearer guidance, that we could have done better. So enough said. I hope that's a transparent enough discussion about what happened. And ultimately, there was no decision to hire co-counsel in that executive session. We did hire co-counsel, we did vote to hire co-counsel, and then we chose a co-counsel properly. Unfortunately, the package went to only one attorney prior to that vote, and it should have gone to all three, or it should have been voted on ahead of time, and there just wasn't time to do that. So we did try to coordinate schedules, and it just didn't happen, so. Okay, other public comment. Mr. Stone.
My father. I'm sorry I'm late. I guess I missed a little bit. You say there was no vote taken, yet somehow a lawyer got sent all the information. How's that possible? You know,
The town attorney
and then,
wanted
let
to
me say
pursue.
this, the one other thing is, when you sent him that, as far as I'm concerned, you hired him
Well,
without the board voting. Because this was before the weekend, and then come Tuesday night, they said you're talking about it, and they take a vote. Well, it had already been voted on somehow, whether it was through ESP or something else.
A vote hadn't been made, I assure you,
A
Oscar.
formal vote may not have been made in front of this
No
people
vote.
here.
I
Then how is it possible
insist.
you hire an attorney?
We didn't hire
Wishful
him. Those are
thinking?
your words. We didn't hire the attorney. Yes, we should have sent the package out to all the attorneys on the list, okay? It only went to the number one attorney. Perhaps Attorney Shepard assumed that that was who we were going to go to. That was not an assumption of the board. In fact, as I watched the tape, Mr. Krevling raised another name, at least one, and discussed about other names on the list. So that vote could have gone the other way. And then there wouldn't have, that attorney would not have had as much prep time, okay? I agree with you, Oscar. The package either should not have gone out until there was a vote, or it should have gone out to all three attorneys on the list, okay?
I would think
I-
so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll be back.
Yes, sir. Yes, Mrs. Wright.
Hi, Jody Wright from 12 Wilson Street. And because Ron Long just talked about the application process for HUD, I wanted to talk a little bit further about that. First of all, I want to say that on August 2nd, I came to the first meeting in 2012, or 2011, and from then to now, I've kind of gotten educated on local municipal government. Prior to August 2nd, I really had no clue any kind of interrelations, names that you guys call things. I barely knew the word ordinance, but nevertheless, here I am, a few months later, and I kind of know from Oscar density and all these other words. So, with that said, I'm going to share with you what I did know is I ran a statewide homeless program in another state. And I'm very familiar with ESG. Those are funds from HUD. And I mentioned this to Keith at a couple of meetings, that I couldn't understand why the town of Berwick was going into a contract or a lease with a developer or anyone that was working with low income or people that needed affordable housing, well, without incorporating ESG funds. And the reason I mention ESG funds, because they're called Emergency Shelter Grant Funds. and what they're used, HUD gives them to different states, and they're to be used for anything. So, for instance, if I am working with a guy that's impoverished, I can buy him a pair of boots with those funds. I could buy him a dinner at the 99. I could buy him blankets. Dave and I could go out and furnish his apartment. They are just funds that have no attachments to them. In the state that I worked in, we had $1 million to utilize in a year's time to buy indigent people, people that are disenfranchised, any kind of thing that they wanted. And I'm getting to a point. My point is, I specifically asked, because I know that the Batemans have 30 years of experience working with these type of affordable housing facilities and apartments and whatnot. So I specifically asked why our town, meaning via through Keith or via Bateman, did not incorporate any kind of ESG funds into that facility over there, that apartment complex. I was told on August 31, and then other days too, that there was no need for ESG funds, because we were not going to be attracting people that needed assistances like that. Keith's words, it's on tape. And here we are. I have the application. I'm not sure which folder. This is the small application to HUD for the Bateman project. And rippled all the way through this is homeless and seriously mentally ill. I have nothing against homeless and seriously mentally. In fact, I love the mentally ill. But the problem is, I do have problems that when a town throws at the people who pay the taxes the idea of this is for the working man. But I have a letter in here from NAMI, the National Mentally Ill Association, saying that they will get Bateman the 20% that he needs. That's kind of the assurance letter from NAMI to HUD via Misha. So my point is when we're doing applications, I know they're complicated, and this, as you can see, is probably 100 papers or so, but all through this is rippled that there's going to be people that are so disenfranchised that have to move in there. Why wouldn't we as a town want to attach any kind of ESG funds? I could go on with the fund titles so that we would be prepared to help the people. But when we're being told it isn't for that population, we don't have to worry about that. It's kind of telling us, misrepresenting. So I guess I would want to address Keith, if I could, Mr. Chairman, why we were told when it's, I mean, I could hand this to you, I could hand it to Keith, and he can thumb through this and see all the way through that it says 20% homeless. That means people that are pretty much indigent and or mentally ill. And when they say mentally ill, it doesn't mean that they have slight cases of depression because they can't afford their property taxes. It's because they have deep mental illnesses that aren't very pleasant, and they typically cannot keep a job. They usually are on SSDI or SSI, and I can go on and on and on because this is what I did for work for many years. But they certainly are not people that can sustain their own living. So I'm right back to the point. Could I ask Mr. Trefethan why he told the public that it wasn't that population and Bateman dittoed that to the public?
It would be nice if we had a little video clip of that occurring, those statements being made. But I understand there's a lot of people in the audience that have witnessed that yet.
There was 400 people upstairs when he said that. There was 400 people upstairs when Bateman said that.
Mr. Manager, I'll give you the option of whether or not you would like to entertain the question.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't privy to the application process with HUD. that was done by the developer or through Maine State Housing. I didn't have any, review of their documents that they submitted on behalf of their funding. That was something that the developer did on his own, based on the approvals that we granted through the town meeting action in 2009, when the town voted to extend the opportunity to have an affordable housing project here. That was what was presented to the board. And
So
presented to
when
the
you
town.
were making those statements, you had no knowledge that that was actually the intent of the developer as demonstrated by this file and application being moved forward through HUD and Misha? There's your answer, Mrs. Wright.
Okay. In kind of reverse of what I just asked, I want to say also, come March of last year, Mr. Trefethan was indicating in the newspaper, and we have the clippings, that the money that was going to be made from the Bateman project was going to go into the what fund, David? Capital Improvement Fund. That's what was stated by you many times, that any proceeds from that establishment was going to go in the capital improvement funds. But I don't know how you take property taxes, because that's the only thing that Bateman is going to be paying per year, from what I understand, and put that into a capital improvement fund. Is that something that there's some wiggle room that I don't know about?
No, I'm sure that there isn't any wiggle room. I think one of the things that the previous board was contemplating, and it wasn't voted, and that was what that discussion was predicated on, I believe, was that they were thinking about using the dollars, or asking the townspeople to use the dollars that would be created through tax dollars from the project for other things, other capital projects within town. That was a discussion that the previous board was having.
So I
And I
just
was
want.
just alluding to it, that's all.
Thank you, Keith. I just want to leave the board with the idea that, so we know that 20% has to be mentally ill and homeless, and we also know in this application that they have to accept all Section 8 subsidies. That's not a choice. That, they take precedence over any other renter. So if I go over there with a Section 8, a walking paper is what they're called, they have to take me first before they can take any other kind of resident. And then therefore, on top of it, they take people with 50% median income. And I don't know how, we've talked about that in the past. It's a very low income range. So I guess this isn't for the working people. That was my point. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Wright, I would encourage you, and I guess I'll ask you, are you sharing these same concerns and the same data with the planning board?
I haven't as yet.
Because of the substantial change in footprint and the reconfiguration from 2 to include 8 3-bedroom units, there is going to be a change to the burden on the school system, and that's fair game for the planning board to include in their consideration of whether or not they want to approve or disapprove of the changes. So you would encourage you to communicate that to them as well, because that appears to be one of the next steps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I understand that it might be May 17th. There's a possibility that Bateman will put in an application to the planning board, and Keith can ditto this for me. I think they have on the calendar waiting whether he's going to submit that application for May 17th.
The
So
board will
hopefully all the-
discuss a statement coming out of our executive session to discuss the litigation, and we will try to be as forthcoming as possible with pertinent detail as to information such as you're requesting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just a minute, folks. I just want to, while Mrs. Wright began her comments, I know Mr. Long and Mr. Stone, the first two speakers, and I know there's others in the community because I heard about this by email and telephone calls, that there are people very upset with the way that the co-counsel came about and was voted upon. And We've talked, for those of you just walked in the room, we talked about how the process could have been improved, and I don't want to go backwards. So I'll just read here that members of a body should refrain from use of email as a substitute for deliberating or deciding substantive matters properly confined to public proceedings. Email is permissible to communicate with other members about non-substantive matters, such as scheduling meetings, developing agendas, and disseminating information and reports. And the board was polled by email and by telephone to make what it was a substantive decision on co-counsel prior to the weekend, so that there could be maximum preparation time. And I would encourage first the town manager, please not to poll by email or telephone in attempt to get a vote on a substantive matter. And I would also encourage the board members not to participate if they are polled as a result of this clause in the Maine Freedom of Access Act. So I'm hoping that that will satisfy those who are concerned about the way that happened, and that I'm hoping there'll be no further comment on that and we can move on. Okay. Next, Mrs. Wheeler.
Thank you. Peg Wheeler. And I just would like to follow up what Jody said. I'm hearing a lot of this, we didn't know, and it was what was voted on in 2009. I've looked at that stack of documents and some others, and all through there, I think there's plenty of opportunity for people to have known. And my concern would be going backward and then going forward. It seems to me that the town manager's position, and I have a little bit of experience, should be to stay very involved with any process or activity that has a huge potential impact on the town. So when I look at that stack of documents, I don't think I understand how somebody wouldn't have known, why they wouldn't have been motivated to ask to look at those applications. It wasn't all that long ago that we went through an application for a facility over on, I think it was Old Pine Hill Road, if anybody remembers, for disabled people, mentally ill. I think it was specifically mentally ill. And we had some really significant, lengthy conversations about whether or not we were really doing those people any favors by placing a facility somewhere they wouldn't have public transportation, there were no sidewalks, and we would essentially, as Jody was sort of describing, be leaving them without any support. If this project at any point in time had the potential for including that population, I think it would have behooved us all to have been informed of that and had the opportunity to really have that level of a conversation. I think people were confused, and maybe they shouldn't have been, but they really did believe this project was senior housing for the most part. When it became affordable housing, I don't think the bulk of the taxpayers in this town would assume that means low income, very low income, homeless, and severely mentally disabled. That is a little bit different than I think what people were anticipating. And in my understanding, that would be the town manager's job to make sure people in the town were protected or at least informed, rather than be sitting here at this juncture saying, I didn't know. I mean, that's not really fair, that we all voted on it in 2009 when we said affordable housing was okay. I didn't know that I voted for that. And had I had the opportunity to have the conversation we had about the other facility, I would have said, as Jody's saying, we're not prepared to have those people there. It's not fair to the town or to that population. So I hope going forward, we really expect who's ever leading the ship here to stay very much involved and not to be saying, I didn't know. If I'd have had the opportunity to look at those documents a year ago, I'd have certainly taken advantage of it, and I hope that's what happens in the future. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, Eleanor.
Peg, when I came on the board in May of 2011, and I knew a lot, but to get up to speed. But when I went through the packet and read the application that Maine State Housing, and to get the extra points of things they went through, I said to myself, where did I miss this packet? So I went back through everything, and I had a whole thing on Bateman, back to everything, and I did not have the packet that Keith was just talking about. They never did give that to this board at that time, because when I started reading, and I've got it all highlighted out, low income, NAMI, which is bipolar mostly, as you probably know, and homeless. And I'm thinking, where was I all that time? We never saw that information. Not once did I ever see that information. And I do read everything I
Right,
get.
you came onto the board, though, sort of a hair after the fact.
Yeah.
In my understanding. And some of those documents have email addresses or other addresses that suggest they went to other people. I guess what I'm saying is very early on, in 2009, affordable housing was what it became called. And I think there was some research that should have been done at that point that said, what does that mean? And Mr. Bateman and your son, what exactly are you doing in terms of what you're pursuing for extra points or whatever? We knew, I went to meetings where we were talking about missing points.
Yeah.
So there were some conversations about, well,
Oh, yeah, and they had to add all this stuff to get
it's
the
right.
extra points.
Well, somebody should have been involved in that. Somebody should have been keeping their eye on that ball, because very clearly they were able to slip that in while somebody wasn't paying attention and didn't have their eye on the ball.
Well,
And
that's
that's
my-
not really fair to people
That's my
in
opinion,
this
that
town.
they slipped it in.
So, thank you.
Can I make one more comment, sir? If it's brief. Go ahead, Noel.
It's been, is that something that the planning board could consider, or is that perhaps the contention is that that was included in the proposal all along? Our contention is we didn't know about it, but, you know, that's going to be a significant amount of resources that we're not prepared for, and perhaps similar to, and that's where I was going with the school
Right.
comment. It's something that the planning board could consider.
I would anticipate that you will all be having conversations about that in a different arena, but I know, speaking for myself, that I'll certainly be approaching the planning board with those concerns. But I don't know. If we've approved this on some level, I think we're in a fair bit of trouble. But if we were misled, then I suppose that's a conversation I'm not going to be privy to in the near future. So I'm simply saying, regardless of which way that happened, we ought to have been more careful in the first place, or we wouldn't be finding ourselves here. How those points were achieved to get him what he needed, and we weren't aware of how, I don't think there's a reasonable excuse for that. That he slipped it in. Well, we knew he was missing points. We knew he had to get points. How he got them, we should have been watching and asking for detailed information and copies of all the documents used to achieve it that we now have.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Wheeler. Before we go on, I'd like to point out that our attorneys are here, and so I don't want to cut off public comment, but I would encourage you to, there is another session at the end. If you have a comment that's specifically applicable to our executive sessions that are going to be next on the agenda, I would encourage you to make those comments now and hold the others for the end of the meeting.
Is the executive session about the Bateman project?
The first executive session is meeting with both Attorney Shepard and Dench to review the Bateman litigation. That's correct.
I'll keep it brief, Mr. Chairman. It's been brought to my attention just today that the town manager had the assessing department separate the lots over there, and I think that Attorney Dench and Attorney Shepard should be apprised of that, so that they know that, and I'm gonna get the numbers a little bit wrong, that the police department is now on 9 point whatever acres, and the Bateman project's on 2 point whatever acres. And the trouble with that is that none of it works, because we started out with a 10.2 acre lot, and now somehow there's 11 and a half, and then you get John's numbers, so I just want both attorneys to know that. That's number one. Number two, Mrs. Murphy, some time ago, had asked about a 75-year lease, which was told that there's not, then she was told that that wasn't true, you never said that. But my point is, there is also a contingency that the attorneys need to know about, that Bateman has, Maine State Housing either has a 90 or a 99-year hold on that property. That's not what the taxpayers or the incompetent board signed that lease allowing them to do. It's 75, so if it's anything more than that, can't we get out of that lease?
Well, it has to, that 90-year it has to stay in low income for 90 years.
Right,
According to the Mashers.
Right, but the
Funding.
town of Berwick did not enter into any agreement with Maine State Housing.
Right.
We entered an agreement with Bateman for 75 years. If they can't meet that 90 years, that's too bad for them, but we shouldn't have to suffer for that at all. And then finally, while you weren't here, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Crichton spoke about a meeting that I had asked about where Keith held the meeting in his office in July of 2010 with the Batemans and the entire former board. That's an illegal meeting, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention and the attorney's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Manager, is there some way to account for a reallocation of the acreage other than a subdivision process?
I'm not quite sure. You'll have to ask we'd have to ask the planning board how that process.
Was your implication, Mr. Long, that there was some tax shifting along with that reallocation of acreage that favored the Bateman developer versus the town?
I apologize, I don't have the paper in front of me, so I'm just gonna give you some numbers. That entire lot was appraised at somewhere around either 1.2 or 1.3 million dollars. Now, the property, and that was a whole 10-acre lot. Now the property for the police department is around 130, 140,000 with 9.2 acres. And the other one is 400,000 with 2.4 acres, whatever the numbers really are. And when the assessing office was asked about it, they said that they did what the town manager told them to do. And the reason why it was brought up is it was brought up on Facebook, and there is no deed at York County Registry of Deeds showing the split, so it's an illegal subdivision.
So it sounds like the ground lease does not match the record that you're referring to.
100% right.
Very good. We'll take that under advisement, Mr. Long. Thank
I
you.
have a copy of the tax card if you'd like it. I'm
Is that the
gonna
one
share
from
it with
today?
you.
Sure.
Yeah. They're claiming the police department, who we know has less than enough square footage to even contain the building, now they're being assessed for having 9.5 acres more or less. Isn't that funny? Keith, I'd like $1 for each page as well. $3.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
$3, Oscar.
Yes, Mr. Rodrigue.
David Rodrigue, 12 Wilson Street. Mr. Chairman, I do want to make you aware, I have expressed before that I believe this case is an urgent matter. I believe that the town needs to be much more proactive in managing this case, in preparing for this matter. I want to be clear that there are 2 plans that I saw at the Registry of Deeds. One is the registered amended parking plan, which is a site plan. The other is a detailed survey of the lot. It's 3 or 4 pages and a very detailed survey of the lot explaining exactly what Bateman has encumbrance on, and it's the entire 10 plus or minus acres, whatever is identified. What I believe is that when there's a land use violation and there's a leaseor and a leasee, both parties have some responsibility. So Bateman has built something different than what the planning board has approved, different than the plan they registered at the Registry of Deeds. And I want the town of Berwick, as a landowner, to pursue remedies. We're being directed to the planning board, and we will pursue this through the planning board if that's a course of action Bateman chooses to take to correct or try to correct their site plan. But I also ask that the town explore all options as owner of the land and as leaser of the land to rectify this, and that every option, including voiding the lease, be fully explored and executed. And I will ask once again for competent management to be put in charge of this case, so we are leading the charge, not reacting to what Bateman chooses to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Roderick. Yes, sir.
Norman Petman, I live on 3-8 School Street, Berwick, Maine. There's nothing to do with Bateman, what I've got to bring up. This is about the scoff law in the state of Maine. I don't know if you people know what that is. Eleanor knows what it is. And Bob Creighton knows what it is. It's about people moving into the town from out of state that don't register their vehicles. I brought this to the police department's attention in 2009, and they told me basically to mind my own business. But when Bob was running as selectman, I lobbied to get him in, got a lot of votes for him, and I'm sorry I did, because I showed him the same thing, and nothing was done. I'd like to I got a copy for each of you selectmen if you want to look at it.
I think I brought that to your attention, Keith.
A lot of money being in this town is not
That's
being
right.
collected.
They don't pay excise tax,
Thank you, sir.
and they have 30 days to register in the state once they move here. And I think I counted 10 the other day, because I'm out counting them now.
Copy for each of the selectmen there.
Okay. So, the chair will entertain a motion to enter executive session under 405(6)E, discussion with town attorney regarding a review of the abatement litigation with both attorneys Shepherd and Dent.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to do that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Excuse me, where does that leave us as far as being on the agenda, the library?
I think you're last.
If you haven't had dinner yet, you probably have time.
We have a warrant, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Once we come out, we have public comment, communications, warrants, and then we get into unfinished business where the board has already exercised some flexibility here in taking things out of order, and I would encourage them, because not only do they have the library here to discuss matters, they also have Mr. Underwood here to talk about possible changes in comprehensive plan, and the sewer district here to discuss a warrant article. So I would advise them to take it out of order at that point, once they come out and get that taken care of for them.
Very good.